You won't believe how far one woman went just to prove a point, and how it ended with the FBI knocking on her door. It all started in a quiet neighborhood run by a strict HOA, where everyone mostly kept to themselves. That is, until she showed up. You know the type. Always watching, always complaining. Let's just call her Karen. At first, it was little things. Notes about lawn height, passive-aggressive emails about trash bins. But things took a turn the day I brought home my pride and joy. A restored vintage Porsche I'd been working on for years. From the moment it rolled into the driveway, Karen had a problem with it. She claimed it was a visual nuisance and didn't meet some obscure HOA guideline. I tried to keep things civil, but she wasn't having it. Then, one morning, the car was just gone, stolen, no broken glass, no clues, just vanished. The police took a report, but honestly, it felt like no one believed me. It wasn't until I started digging myself that things started to unravel, and what I found led to something way bigger than a stolen car. Turns out, this wasn't just a neighbor dispute. It was a setup tangled in fake identities, shady paperwork, and something that caught the attention of federal agents. And when the FBI got involved, let's just say Karen had no idea they were already watching her. What happened next will blow your mind. A week before the car disappeared, Karen had already started causing problems. She'd show up at my door with a printed copy of the HOA rules, pointing to a vague line about vehicle aesthetics. I told her the Porsche was legally registered, in perfect condition, and parked in my own driveway. But that didn't matter to her. She wanted it gone. She even threatened to escalate the issue if I didn't move it. I thought it was all talk, until it wasn't. The day it vanished, I was in shock. There were no signs of forced entry. No camera footage because the neighborhood's HOA cameras were mysteriously offline that night. That felt way too convenient. I filed a police report, but they didn't find much. It looked like the car had just been driven away, like someone had the keys. That's when I started wondering, how would anyone get past the old-school alarm system and custom ignition setup? I remembered Karen had made a weird comment a few days before it happened. She said, "It's a shame when people leave expensive toys lying around. Sometimes they just disappear." At the time, I brushed it off as one of her usual snarky remarks, but now it felt different, intentional. Out of frustration, I started looking into her background, just basic stuff. And what I found didn't add up. Different last names on public records. A strange business registered to her address. I wasn't sure what she was hiding, but it definitely wasn't just about a car. I decided to dig deeper into Karen's history, figuring maybe she had a record or some kind of red flag. What I found wasn't criminal exactly, but it was weird. She'd lived in at least 5 different neighborhoods over the past 7 years, and in every single one, she had some kind of complaint filed against her, either to the HOA or from it. Noise violations, harassment claims, even one bizarre case where a neighbor accused her of trespassing. It was like she made chaos wherever she went. At the same time, I started talking to other neighbors. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd been targeting. One guy had his garden torn up because it didn't meet aesthetic standards. Another woman said Karen threatened to report her for running a daycare just because her grandkids visited too often. The more I heard, the more it felt like Karen had some kind of power trip going on, using the HOA rules as her personal weapon. But then came the twist I didn't expect. A neighbor 2 streets over, a retired mechanic, pulled me aside and asked if I was missing a car. When I said yes, he got quiet and said he'd seen Karen driving what looked like my Porsche, except it had different plates and a quick paint job. He didn't want to get involved, but he was sure it was the same car. That's when everything shifted. This wasn't just an annoying neighbor dispute anymore. This was personal. And possibly criminal. After hearing the mechanic's tip, I knew I had to act fast but carefully. If Karen really had the car, then this was way beyond an HOA dispute. I started documenting everything: screenshots of her weird HOA emails, photos of the empty driveway, a copy of the police report, and even a written statement from the neighbor who spotted the Porsche. I didn't confront her directly. I didn't want to spook her. Instead, I contacted a friend who worked in local law enforcement. Off the record, he agreed to take a look at the details I'd gathered. That's when things escalated. One night, I noticed a black SUV slowly cruising past my house. Then it happened again the next evening. My friend told me not to panic, but to stay alert, because now the case was getting attention from higher up. Turns out the car's VIN had been flagged. Not just as stolen, but as possibly connected to a larger investigation involving forged titles and stolen vehicles being resold through fake shell companies. The shady business registered to Karen's name suddenly made a lot more sense. Then came the most surreal moment. 2 men in suits showed up at my door. Not local cops. They were federal agents. They asked about the car, about Karen, and about everything I'd noticed. I told them everything, including the neighbor's sighting. One of them just nodded and said, "You've helped more than you." No. And that's when they told me. They'd been watching Karen for months. Hearing that the FBI had already been watching Karen completely flipped everything I thought I knew about the situation. But just when I thought I was starting to understand what was going on, they hit me with something I didn't see coming. One of the agents asked if I had ever received any strange packages, emails, or phone calls over the past few months. I said no, not really, until I remembered something. A few weeks before the Porsche vanished, I got a thick envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside were HOA documents, but they looked fake, rules I'd never seen before, along with warnings about compliance enforcement. I tossed it, thinking Karen was just getting creative. But now the agent's face changed. He asked if I still had it. I didn't. That was the moment I realized I might have been part of something way bigger than just a stolen car. Apparently, Karen wasn't just flipping stolen vehicles. She was also under investigation for running a fake HOA scam. In neighborhoods where she didn't even have real authority, she would pose as an HOA board member, send out official-looking letters, collect fines, and even demand property changes. And my neighborhood might have been her latest target. That's when the stakes got real. If what they suspected was true, then the Porsche wasn't the first thing she stole, and it probably wouldn't be the last. The agents warned me. Karen was clever, and things were likely to get messy before they got better. A few days after the agent's visit, everything came to a head. One morning, just as I was leaving for work, I saw a convoy of black vehicles pull into the neighborhood, unmarked, silent, but serious. Within minutes, they swarmed Karen's house. I stood at a distance with a few other neighbors, all of us stunned as agents moved in, some heading for the garage, others knocking firmly on the door. Karen stepped outside looking confused, holding a coffee mug like it was just another morning. But when she saw the badges, her whole face changed. They found my Porsche in her garage, hidden under a tarp, freshly painted, with fake plates and a phony bill of sale taped to the windshield. Inside her house, they found stacks of counterfeit HOA notices, fake documents, and files on multiple homeowners in our neighborhood. Turns out she had been preparing to expand her scam. She wasn't just acting as the HOA. She was creating her own, on paper anyway, and had nearly convinced several people to pay her bogus fees. As they loaded her into the back of a car, the agent I'd spoken to before turned to me and said, "She's been pulling this for years. You were the first one to push back hard enough to help us stop her." But just when I thought it was over, I got a call from a blocked number that night. A distorted voice said, "You shouldn't have gotten involved." Then the line went dead. That phone call shook me more than I expected. For days, I kept looking over my shoulder, wondering if Karen had someone else involved, someone still out there. I reported it to the agents, and they assured me they'd trace the number. They believed it was just an intimidation tactic, one last scare from someone who knew the game was up. Still, it left a chill I couldn't shake. Eventually, things started to settle down. The Porsche was returned to me, a little beat up, but still mine. I took it to the same mechanic who'd tipped me off. He helped restore it, almost like a full-circle moment. As for Karen, she faced multiple federal charges, not just for vehicle theft, but for fraud, impersonation, and wire crimes tied to her fake HOA scheme. Turns out, she'd been running this scam across 3 different states, using different names, and staying just under the radar. Until now. Neighbors began talking more, sharing stories, and realizing how close we'd all come to being conned. Our real HOA had to step in and clean up the mess she left behind. But in a way, it brought the community closer together. We weren't just quiet neighbors anymore. We looked out for each other. Looking back, it's wild to think a vintage Porsche and one determined woman could unravel something so much bigger. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Never underestimate your gut feeling, and sometimes the quietest streets hide the loudest secrets.